Barely, but we got it. Then we'll go to number 3, public appearances, public's opportunity to speak. We have a request to speak from Mark Spahos. If you want to come up and hit the button with the little person talking.
This will be really quick. I spent about an hour on the phone, and this is in regard to the Lakewood project. There's a concern about lack of transparency by the community over there. I've been knocking on doors because of the my candidacy, and I talked to Abby McDowell. I didn't knock on her door, but I talked to her on the phone for over an hour in my driveway the other night, and they're just wondering, because they saw that the lift station was tabled, if things are being approved that they're unaware of, and they're worried about that because Pamela Hansen on Wheelbridge Road received a call from Alliant Energy, and it was either in regard to a 12 by 12 foot I'm not sure exactly what it was, a piece of equipment that was 12 by 12 that they wanted to place in her yard, and she was told it was for the development of the Lakewood project. So now everybody over there is asking, is there something going on that we don't know about? So she was gonna try and make it here tonight. We have snow. I don't know if she's gonna be at the planning meeting and have somebody drive her. She's not on remotely. So I just felt that I should step up and say, hey, this was a concern she brought to me, so I wanted to bring it to you guys. I know it's public works, but because it has to do with the electrifying the area, I just wanted to know if A, you knew anything, or, and I know this isn't a back and forth, and B, just to make it a public record that these people want to know what's going on and they don't feel they're getting transparency at this point. And that's all I have.
Thanks, Mark. Just for the record, I also got contacted about that. I know it's not on the agenda tonight, but maybe it's something we can put on for next month. We'll move to number 4. Discuss and consider the minutes from the previous Public Works meeting in January.
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes as presented.
We have a motion. Is there a second? There's a second. Anyone want to talk about it? Otherwise, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? All right, motion passes. We'll move to number 5. Update on the 2025 Street and PED Improvements Project.
Do you want me to start?
Yeah, you start.
Okay.
Yep.
So Strand is wrapping up the design for the 2025 Streets project. As we previously discussed in the last couple meetings, a few things to point out that have been discussed and requested and looked into by this committee. We are planning to have concrete through the commercial driveways for the path. We will have those concrete, so you'll have that differential from asphalt to concrete through the driveway aprons. One thing to note is I did drive along the bike path, the multi-use path on Matt Pass up in our business park, and if you go up there, all of those commercial driveways are also concrete. So we have this standard for commercial driveways, and then all of our residential driveways are asphalt, as seen on N and Oak Street. The overhead lines are planned to be buried for underground fiber optic by Alliant. We'll have new streetlights as part of the project as well. The retaining wall that is going to be going along the resident property along Uphoff. There's an existing retaining wall and it will be reconstructed. Let's see if I can do this. I'm gonna just stop sharing here. The plan right now is to have the retaining wall be a limestone color, so kind of a light tan color that will look nice along BB, as well as a concrete cap, so it'll just be the color of normal concrete on top of that. And then there will be a railing, because the wall will be sitting and the ground drops off on the back end. This railing is actually the only railing that I could find in the village, and it's located along the Vilas bike path. And so we will match that railing as well for the standard through there.
It's a black steel, right? Kind of metal framing rail. It's a good high-end railing type for that. I think there was a question about height of that railing, right? And I don't know if you want to check that one out, Kyla, but you can go down from like 3.5 minimum to 4.5 max.
Yep.
Obviously, there's a cost difference. That rail's fairly expensive, so I don't know if the committee has a preference on that or not, or if we should go look at sort of what we have out here today and kind of match that.
based on where that railing is, I mean, what's the most appropriate height to have? Is it, the 4.5, or is it 3.5 sufficient?
I mean, I think you could go either way. It's not a real long length of rail, so it's not like if you go a little high, it's gonna look awkward. I mean, 4.5 is just a little bit higher.
Right.
Sometimes they'll put it up higher though too. I mean, there is gonna be bikes, so people are gonna sit up a little bit. So I tend to prefer the 4.5. It's just a little more costly on that side. 3.5 is down just a little bit more. Either one protects. Again, there's a minimum, and there's a preferred. We kind of leave it up to the community on really what they want to do.
I guess can we just see the price difference?
Yeah.
And make a call once we know that?
Mhm.
If it's significant.
So we're gonna
make it-
bid the project. Maybe we bid it with 2 different types of rails, 2 different heights, and then we just decide later.
Yeah, we could do a 3.5 and a 4.5.
Yep. And then just kind of have an alternate, and then we'll pick that at a later date when the bids come in. I think it's a good compromise at this point.
Kyla, can I ask the driveways you mentioned in the very
Yeah.
beginning?
Yep,
Those are going to be, you said, concrete, not asphalt.
correct.
Is there a decision why was that made?
So the concrete will match, so it was very similar to what was taken out of this committee. And Nick, I think you are the one who liked the contrast between the asphalt and the concrete through the driveway. Right now, up at Matt Pass along the bike path up there, if you look at all of the commercial driveways, so there's Stantec's up there, and there's a couple other commercial driveways, that all of those sidewalks through the driveways are all concrete, and then it goes back to asphalt.
So the multi-use path across those are concrete?
Correct.
Are we able to distinguish that length of driveway that the path covers as a different color?
We could. I do not have a price on that. However, it is a very costly because it is a green. And from the other communities that I've kind of heard from staff, they do say it's a very costly green aspect, as that's the only green that we will have in the village. But it's something that we could look into in the future as well.
I mean, I'll just make my opinion known that I would prefer the right-of-way of the path be very clear and distinct from the driveway, however it be done.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that too. Of course, if it's an astronomical price, we probably got to look at it, but if we could see what the cost would be.
Would you rather
do you
have it be
border?
asphalt?
I was thinking just to have a border, the lane, and then where it starts and stops.
So it's not solid
It's
green?
not solid, because it's going to chip up anyway.
Yeah.
Correct.
You're saying John, are you saying switch back to asphalt that goes through there? So you
No,
have concrete?
if you leave the commercial part, I think the concrete's a better material, because you
Yeah,
have.
it holds up a
heavy-
little better.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you have heavy vehicles, particularly in the winter.
Mhm.
I think if you could mark it off, rather than have the whole thing green or whatever
With like
color
a
they choose.
boundary or
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
stripes or something?
Sometimes
So
they'll
that you're not-
stripe them, sometimes
Yeah.
instead, almost like a crosswalk, Nick, like where you'd have just maybe a smaller green stripe on either side of it that runs the total
Yeah.
length, but not the whole thing epoxied, like you're saying. All that requires some maintenance,
Yep.
which Kyla, but it would be a more affordable option, yeah. I think in Fitchburg, they have them laddered on their newer stuff, so just like your laddered crossings of the road where they're the big stripe white, they're doing the green on some of those, I believe, on some of their commercial.
Yeah, I mean, green I know is high maintenance, but I think does a very good job of standing out. And that's what I worry about, but even something white, I think anything is better than nothing. I worry about cars pulling in very fast with bikers coming down. I just would love to make that clear that it is a right-of-way for bikers.
Absolutely. So is the general consensus here to look in as a green stripe, a white stripe? Do we want it as part of the project to have that green striping in? Is it something that you want me to look into if staff can do it separately? Just trying to make sure I have the right direction on what you guys would like me to move
I
forward
mean,
with.
if staff can do it, might be able to save some money doing it that
After,
way.
After the
fact.
project's
Yeah.
done?
Yeah, the good
Yeah.
thing is, putting the concrete down, you can do whatever you want after that. And I know we're talking about the green, and that high vis green that's kind of being used everywhere is fairly expensive. It lasts. Some of it can last up to 3 to 5 years before we have to reapply it. I have seen some people just use more of a green epoxy paint that you still can put down with your own epoxy. If you do have, Kylie, you have some that are
We do.
epoxy, right?
Yep.
Instead, it's not as bright, but it's still a contrast. Do you know what I mean? And if it's on concrete, it's gonna show up a lot better than if it's on black asphalt. So I think with going with the concrete gives you a better chance of having that contrast of whatever you put down. So,
I will look into it for staff being able to look at the green epoxy and come back with you guys in March as part of the project, just to give you a follow-up on where I landed with that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. The other thing to note with the streets project, we are planning to go out for advertisement and bid. So in March, we will come back with the bid results to discuss moving forward with the project. It is planned that the streets portion of the project, all the pulverization, is slated to be completed on August 22nd. This would give time before school starts because some of those streets are bus routes. And then the entire project with the bike path and restoration would be done at the end of September. At that time, that's our current plan for completion dates. Then Josh, I'll let you add anything you're interested.
just a couple other things with it. If you recall, on the streets portion, we have a couple alternatives. One's gonna be the Johnson Health path as an alternative, just because we're kind of right up against the threshold of about where your budget is with all of these items. So we're just trying to make sure we have a couple that we can pull out. The other one is, I think we had some conversation about Progress Drive and Bonnie Road, and we're putting that in as an alternative, as a full kind of intersection reconstruct there, so we can bring all of those crosswalks in traditionally. We don't need those really big sweeping curves there. We've run truck movements through, and we're kind of bringing all that back together. That's an alternative too, if you do it now, or if you do it at a later date, or you do it some time down the road when you're doing a police station or Progress Drive. At least it's kind of thought out as part of that project. One last thing, RRFB wise. So on Taylor and Main Street, we kind of went back and forth with a bunch of different options. What we decided last time is we're just going to put up an RRFB, and it's just, we don't even know if we're going to put it up now or not. We want to be somewhat flexible to try to understand, is there going to be some future development to the east, and are they going to change that intersection? Kyla and I discussed it a little bit. Traditionally, right now, along Main Street route up at the Commerce Park area, that's Limestone, I think, at West Oak, and then down at your Drumlin Trail path, you have the overhead arms. Those are a concrete sonnet tube that's put in the ground. It's bolt to that, and it's hanging over. There's also the ones that you can just put in with tubular mounted posts that you drive into the ground. They don't hang over the lane, but they're beside the lane that you can then take out and move somewhere else. There's not as big of an investment. So, I don't know if this group has an opinion right now on one or the other, or we just bid both, and we still have some time to determine some of that into the future, because we don't know where, or what's happening with that intersection holistically right now. Any thoughts on that?
Well, we've been talking about this for, I don't know how many years now.
Yeah.
And every time I go through there, run or walk or whatever, it's treacherous. And
Yeah.
so we need to do something.
Yeah, I think that, sorry, go ahead.
And if, more of a temporary, we can move it later and put them somewhere else. If that's the solution for now, let's do it.
Yeah.
Until we know what's going on with that intersection.
And just for clarification, we will be putting a crosswalk both on the north and the south
Yes.
side. The south side doesn't have one. We'll be cleaning up the crosswalks. It's just a matter of what do we physically put in the ground on the north side for the RRFBs. You could do a couple different fashions. Both of them could be reused, but it's a bigger investment to put some concrete in the ground and put them in that way, I guess. And then you'd have to reuse those larger ones somewhere else someday versus the smaller units that are kind of street side. It's up to you guys. You can go either way.
What's like the visibility difference between the temporary one and the overhead one?
They're both the same sign, they both flash the same. The overhead one has it up and over the lane, but a lot of times you don't use those overhead ones unless you have two lanes that you're coming up, like one's through and one's a turn. You guys use them a little bit more for visibility, which I like, even when you don't quite have that scenario. But the other ones, in the case of putting them right adjacent, you have one lane in each direction. That would be pretty standard guidance, just to have them right on the side of the road there also. You just aren't gonna have it up over,
Yeah.
above you. You're gonna have it beside you flashing, you know, right on the lane side.
You may not be able to see that anyway because of the tree lines in that area.
It will be a little
overhead
hard, because those trees are kind of
Yeah.
covered up in there a little bit. But the overhead one has one above and it has one on
Yeah,
the
yeah,
post
I-
low. It has like two signs. I should have
Right.
clarified that, Chris.
Yeah, my only concern is there's a lot of school kids walking there, so I just want to,
Mhm.
I don't want to go with one option if it's less visible. If
Yeah.
they're both pretty visible, that's fine. I guess my other concern would be just people driving and seeing a flashing on the side versus flashing overhead. Maybe they think that doesn't apply to them if it's over there.
Right, yeah. I mean, you are gonna get a better sense if it's over the top.
Yeah.
You will. I mean, the ones you have in town that are over, they definitely give you a, hey, you know, a little bit more notice.
But it's both sides when they're on, though.
Yes,
So, I
both
mean,
sides are gonna be
so you're-
flashing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't want to put something in and then in 3 years be like, we need to change this and
Right.
have to dig something out of the ground, so.
Right.
My answer
But
is
I
don't
would
know.
say that, I mean, barring knowing what's gonna happen to the east, if I just take that out of the equation, I think it should be something similar to Oak and Limestone Pass and the Glacial Drumlin. Because it is the main, there's this crossing guard there, right, for school. It is a main crossing section, so I think it should be something like that. Now, whether we factor in I mean, if maybe we go expand out east, I don't know. But ultimately, that's what I think it should be, similar to Limestone and Oak.
So to bring some context, another thought into this, and I agree, I see where you're going. Let's say there is development to the east, or there's just more growth overall in the village. You know, there will be a need likely for a signal there. There's already been some investigation done on that. I've seen some numbers, probably will be a signal. So there won't be probably an RFB there in the future if certain things continue to grow. But you will have push buttons, you will have crosswalks, it'll be a standard signalized intersection, which would make it a lot different than it is today. So these would have to go somewhere if the traffic increases in the future. Either one could be placed somewhere. You know, you could, both of them are removable. They'll both be solar mounted, so we won't be hardwiring them in. They'll both have solar panels and they'll be solar run, so.
Do you have any idea of a timeline for when a signal might be needed?
Depends on development. You mean the current thought out to
Yeah.
the east? 4 or 5 years.
That's a long time.
Maybe sooner, 3 to 5, depending on how fast that would go, if it even goes.
Again, it all is dependent
Yeah.
on.
If
the
it even-
devel-
it's hard to
it's-
predict, but-
Yeah,
I mean,
very hard to
it's just really
predict.
hard, yeah.
I mean, the main reason, just to circle back and to bring it all back, the main reason this project was for the pedestrian improvements.
Yep.
So not bearing any other development, any other thing, that's why it was a priority that came through this committee and up to village board is the pedestrian improvements by the school. Both are great options, as Josh said. It's ultimately what we can move them both. One's kind of more robust. We can always find another place for them.
For a 5-year wait, that's something that is still nebulous. I would make the investment and have it similar to Limestone and Oak.
Yeah. Somebody would ask, what is the probably additional investment? And it's probably just the concrete bases. So you're probably looking at 5, 6, 7 grand maybe for for both. You're buying a bigger system, right? So there's a cost to that too, right? But you can use that somewhere else. So you could pick it up and use it and bolt it somewhere else someday. I think overall, because it's a bigger system and you have to put the concrete in, I think it was like 16,000+. I think Kyla was maybe the number that Christine might have gave you.
Yeah, it was about 16,000 less if you just went with
Yeah.
the pole instead of the entire overhead, give or take.
Yep.
All based on estimates.
You wouldn't lose the 16,000, but you lose a portion of it because you're putting concrete in the ground that you're not going to reuse. If you,
Yeah, but it's, 16,000 over 5 years.
Yep.
So it's not that bad.
and you're losing the whole 16.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The one thing we can do is we could bid both of them if we
Yeah,
are
we
truly interested. And the other good news is if we did just bid the one that's the overhead, we can always do a deduct for a smaller one and it'll just be less cost.
True.
Both are good options
Mm-hmm.
unless you tell me no.
No, you could do either one of those. Yeah, you could just bid the full package, and if we get into more conversations or something else is happening and you know it's going to even happen sooner, you could just swap it out and ask for a credit. to do that. They would need to know before they order it, because some of that stuff still has longer lead times, yeah.
Then I think we go with the full, consistent across.
Yep.
That's all I had, I think, Kyla. I think it's all the questions we have left.
Yep.
For that
Any
reason.
other questions from the committee on the project? Oh, sorry.
There was trees too, but I think Sean is gonna help with the tree side. So we're taking some trees down. The power's coming down along the bike path side. So new trees and other things can go in there now, along Cottage Grove Road.
We're coordinating with Sean and forestry on that.
Right. And then if it's okay with everybody in the committee, I'm gonna move 5B, C, and D to the end just to make sure we got time to talk about the other stuff. Anybody have any objection to that? All right, then we will move to 5E, update on sustainability goals.
All right, so I'm going to take this item. Last couple meetings, we started kind of some conversations about sustainability. A couple committee members kind of wanted some clarification on roles and responsibilities of Public Works facilities and sustainability and what the role of this committee is. So this memo and recommendation is really an effort to start somewhere and simplify the current resolution and start with kind of a couple high-level objectives. And so I just want to talk a little bit more about recommendation 1, 2, and 3. So the first one that I'm recommending is, any facility project should include sustainability options for the village board to consider. Really, this is just not saying that the village board would have to choose a sustainability feature, but this committee is providing guidelines that any large-scale facility projects, we should have at least done our due diligence to see if it was actually feasible to either achieve net zero or get near it, and at least have that information available. Similarly, number 2 asks that Kyla, as the Public Works and Utility Director, at least brings forward one facility-related improvement on an annual basis, whether that's LED lights, et cetera, or other things that could be done to improve overall sustainability in our facilities. And then finally, 3, this would be for guidance for all departments, regardless of committee. But when they are submitting for vehicles, that they have to at least get an alternative bid or an alternative pricing to gas or diesel. Again, lead times or cost likely, at least in the short term, will be more expensive than we're able to show a reasonable recapture. But at least this gets this information available to the village board. So really what this memo does is sets up that on an annual basis, this committee would review what steps for sustainability the village has taken, review, are these guidelines still good? Would we want to make any enhancement? And then provide recommendation again to the village board and department on this is what we would like to be considered in departmental requests. And at that point, this committee then wouldn't be making individual recommendations on a project per se. Where this kind of gets a little hairy is like if you had a park project that also had a sustainability feature. I think when we're talking about like committees that ultimately provide a recommendation, it kind of prevents that project from having to go to this committee for approval and parks from approval, as long as it follows the guidelines of there should at least be a sustainability option for ultimately the village board to make a decision on. So I'll kind of take a beat here and get some feedback from committee members about what the initial proposal.
I think I know the answer to this. I just want to make sure for number 3. Does that include any joint things with like for EMS or fire?
So we can, what I would do, my request would be for EMS and fire and districts that we don't have control over, that we can ask for them to do it. If it's not part of our IGA agreements, or we can't force those options. Anytime I've talked to Lieutenant Lang, or not Lieutenant Lang, Chief Lang, and even Nick, I've asked, like, have we looked at alternatives? And he has the answers, so he's at least looking at it. So I think they're very open to providing that information. But I don't think we can pass a recommendation or policy and force
Yeah.
one of those
Yeah.
entities to comply.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know how reasonable it would be anyway. I mean, I know electric fire trucks exist. I don't know how feasible it would be for Cottage Grove to get one.
Yeah, and a lot of the times the electrification has stayed away from fire equipment, especially like pumpers and things when you have a water apparatus with, from just a pure safety perspective. Yeah, so I totally agree.
I think this is a reasonable direction for everybody. I think we've already kind of operated this way for the last several years, trying to look for alternatives, whether it's hybrid police vehicles or solar panels on the municipal building or even on a park shelter. We're trying to do our part. Makes sense because eventually you'll reap the rewards of that and get the money back. So, I mean, this is a good guideline for us to kind of go by.
So my thought process would be kind of in the spirit of Earth Day happening in April, that every April we'd kind of have it on the agenda for Public Works and Sustainability to review the current guidelines and possible changes, kind of going forward cadence. I also did attach the ordinance for the Public Works and Sustainability Committee. So Kyla and I are also looking for some direction. There's some things in there that could likely benefit some from cleanup, particularly, I know we've talked about like there's some park stuff in there that ultimately we feel is currently being operated under like parks, recreation, and forestry. So we're just looking for some direction from this committee, if we could spend some time maybe cleaning up some of those items.
Yeah, I would say give us a red line of what you want to change, and we'll take a look at it. I'm all for cleaning up the code.
Thanks.
Anybody else have any comments on sustainability
Yeah.
goals?
I mean, a note on the memo. I mean, your 3 points is like yes, yes, and yes. But I also view that as we're already doing that, and it's the bare minimum. I think the one thing lacking from that is like an actual goal. I think the resolution that we had in place already was too aggressive. We all agreed on that, but I think there still needs to be a goal where we have options of an electrified vehicle or not. And if we choose not to do that option, we need to assess that in the sense of, are we going to meet our goal or not of this village? So I think there needs to be something tangible, a metric that we need to hit, or something attached with this.
Yep, and definitely something I considered while drafting this, and I do definitely view this as a starting point for this committee. Is there, while understanding that the prior resolution was probably aggressive, is there any ideas on what a potential either facility or vehicle goal would be to add into this recommendation?
I mean, I think I'm gonna try and follow like what Dane County's done, but it's like maybe trying to find a metrics of, how much electricity, how much natural gas are we using per year? How much gasoline are we buying per year? And just say, okay, can we make those numbers flat? Can we reduce those numbers? But having something tangible on that of like, hey, we are 50% lower carbon, we're using 50% less natural gas in our vehicles because we've had so many electrified vehicles. And maybe something along those lines, but I think we should honestly touch base with Dane County's sustainability office. I mean, they have probably a lot of really good feedback. Kayla, I don't know if you attended that webinar they hosted last month, but I can send slides to everybody. I thought it was a really well done webinar, and they have so many resources available to help communities like ours.
Yes, I did attend it and I thought the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I
so,
mean, but maybe brainstorm a little bit more, but just something a little more tangible so we can like achieve a goal.
so from hearing from you, Nick, I'm hearing to bring this to while what's been presented here is a good starting point to try to get some metrics on the next meeting. So maybe these are more guidelines, and that we bring back actual goals for the next meeting.
Yeah, like I mean, when we put on the solar panels on the MSB building, we reduced our carbon footprint significantly, and we should know how much we reduced it. The police station, we should assume that we're not going to put any solar panels on there, but we are. So like, how much are we going to reduce? Did we reduce that carbon footprint of that building? And it's just knowing that how much are we offsetting versus if we do nothing, you know, what is our footprint? What is our usage going to be like?
Yep, I'm following you. I'm a little worried about using the terms, either staying flat or reducing, particularly in a community that's growing. I'm thinking like, with wells and having to pump more gallons of water to serve more customers, pump more sewage to MMSD, just purely growth or the more customers we're serving could maybe artificially inflate that number. So trying to come up with a goal where how are we showing that we're making improvements, and maybe from a facilities perspective, maybe if we exclude water and sewer infrastructure, at least that might be an easier metric to hit.
I think it's that is the challenge. And
Yeah,
I think
and
it's a good one.
Yep. We'll put some thought to it and
Yeah.
present some additional goals. Ultimately, because this is a recommendatory body, I think it would be good to get some feedback. So I would recommend that this would still go to village board for kind of just a conceptual, like, are they comfortable with these parameters with additional kind of formal goals for coming? So hoping that the committee would be comfortable with that tonight.
Yep.
Seeing a lot of head nodding, so yeah. Any other discussion? Otherwise, we'll move to 6, new business, update on solar panels at MSB.
So I have an app. Fun fact, I was finally able to get into the app. So I am able to share this information with you guys. So as part of our solar panel aspect that we have for our MMSB building, we have a overarching app that I can log into daily that gives us our site energy that we use throughout the day, as well as you can see over the entire lifespan of our solar panels. Obviously, May, June, July, August gives more solar panel usage because of the warm weather, more sunlight. At this point, we've used 80 kilograms. We've saved 80 kilograms of CO2 emissions, as well as we have equivalented planting of just over 1,300 trees. So kind of gives an update of how our usage is actually being used. In January, we had very little snow, lots of sunny days, so we're still getting good usage out of that. If there are any further questions, we can kind of discuss them at a later meeting, just because I know there is more items on the agenda.
Any questions or comments on that for Kyla? All right, we'll move to discuss recommendation regarding sustainability options / features for the proposed police station project.
Kim, do you want to start something? Or do you?
Sorry. I believe we have, is Mike's on. Mike is going to be presenting this item.
Okay. All right. Guess I wasn't ready to present.
So while he's getting this up, over the last, at least 6 months, The police chief, along with staff, have been meeting with Enberg Anderson, going over questions regarding the potential new police station. So obviously, we're getting to the point where to discuss some bigger ticket items, including some of the sustainability features. So we were presented a couple weeks ago 3 very distinct sustainability packages options for the village board to consider. So we felt it was appropriate to bring Enberg Anderson in to discuss the three options.
Yeah, and thank you. So I'm bringing this up. I will kind of give an overview of what we're doing, and I might, we have Mike Klubertans from JDR Engineering on the MEP side of things, so I might have him give an overview on each of the systems that we're looking at. But thank you, yeah. So on the current project, I'll actually go to, yeah. So we sent out a memorandum earlier this week, and it kind of gave you an overview of some of our sustainable items that we're looking at for this project. So on a deep dive, we are looking at 3 different kind of systems on the sustainable side of things. We are looking we're proposing to use a geothermal system. That geothermal system would be using DOAS systems on the roof, and then we'd be using individual heat pumps within the building. And our bore field for that system would be located underneath the parking lot of the secure side of the building. For the next one, we are looking at covering the roof with solar panels. Solar panels would be located on the roof. Let me grab to that one. Yes. So this is a roof plan. So we are covering a majority of the roof with solar panels. These are kind of low profile solar panels that you actually would see, very little from the street. You can see they're in 3 dimensions here. The 4 panels that are over here and that kind of go along with the 4th system or the 3rd system. And that 3rd system would be solar hot water for the building itself. Just a little bit on the building itself. So those are really along the lines of the MEP side of things. The building itself was a little bit of description kind of developed inside this packet that we sent out. So the building itself will be mostly masonry exterior, but what we are looking at is doing spray foam insulation on the walls and a considerable amount of insulation on the roof as well. And the why I bring that up is the fact that what we always like to install in our buildings doesn't necessarily, and it's still, even if we eliminate some of the sustainable features, we will be, we'd like a thorough and tight envelope out there. So we're going to get about an R20 envelope and about an R35 roof. And our whole detailing will be, kind of continuous from the foundation up through the roof itself. So those are the things that we're looking at kind of on a rough scale thing. I'm going to actually ask Mike to kind of elaborate on each one of those systems a little bit more.
Thanks, Mike. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, let me figure out how to share here. And I'm gonna, I gotta send a request to share. I can take a little bit deeper dive further into that same report or memorandum that Mike was referring to. I'm going to start with, and so just to give you guys a background, JDR Engineering, we're in Madison. We're mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection for the project with Mike's team. I happen to be electrical, so I'm going to do my best to speak to the HVAC and the plumbing systems. Tim Meeker, our HVAC engineer for the project, is actually attending a meeting next Monday. So we're kind of dividing and conquering to cover these meetings. So like I said, I'll do my best with the HVAC, but we have 3 options, kind of a good, better, best scenario right now on the HVAC side. So our option A, and can you see what I'm showing?
Yep.
Okay. So we've got Option A, kind of a traditional sort of system, packaged rooftop units, VAV throughout the building, hot water reheat, um, electric, natural gas, no geothermal, kind of what I would call a standard sort of system for this type of building. Our better option is the geothermal that Mike mentioned. So again, the system itself is similar. It's just introducing the geothermal aspect, the bore field that Mike mentioned. And then we have what's called option C, which is distributed geothermal heat pumps throughout the building. And then the DOAS system, the dedicated outdoor air system on the roof. The system we're leaning towards at this point is, as Mike mentioned, the option B. So it's kind of the traditional sort of system.
It's actually
It's
C.
reliable.
It's
just
C,
also,
Mike.
pardon me?
It's C.
I thought we were focusing on B. Are we focusing on C? Okay.
We have C, yes.
All right. Okay. Fair enough. All right. So that's the DOAS systems. Again, roof mounted equipment, providing you your dedicated outside air. Any questions, so to speak, on these systems or general? And I can do my best, but any questions on those options?
I guess what's the cost benefit of, obviously the option A is pretty standard. I mean,
Correct.
from between B and C, what's the financial benefit? Obviously, we'd want to look at that as well.
Right.
Running that building over multiple years.
Yeah, so I'll interject right here with that. So right now, currently, we are working with, we have been working with Focus on Energy throughout this process. And just recently, we met with them again because we actually got some estimates back. And we have narrowed down our system to bundle 3, which is option C. So, currently, it tells you on the bottom kind of what the dollar per square foot. So if we're going up from a bundle 1, which is our typical, what you might see, in this scenario, it's costing about $5.50 more. But, that's really, in today's prices, there's a lot of different variables kind of going on. So that can fluctuate on how much the bore field costs and how much the system costs. So it is an increase through option A, your standard gas-fired. But with the option C, and that's where we're actually getting better numbers, and we can come back to you in the next month and propose or display those numbers that we're seeing from them. But it is going to be an increase. But what happens with this one is obviously we're going to see a savings every month on those operating costs versus the base bid is what we're talking about. But currently we just don't have those numbers with Focus on Energy quite yet, but we will be able to get to those soon.
And assuming that we have a payback period, and once you get those numbers, you'll be able to essentially share that with this group.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
All right.
Yep. That's the one piece we're missing today on that.
No, that's fine.
Any other questions?
I have one question, not related to the HVAC system actually, but there was no mention in the memorandum of charging stations,
Yes.
like a 240 volt lines being put in for eventual EV police cars. Is that something being considered?
Yeah, it is, and I as soon as you said that, I knew I forgot to include that. So
Yeah, as soon as you guys were talking about it, I was thinking the same thing, Mike. Yep.
what we actually discussed, Nicholas, was that I know when we're talking with the police that they didn't feel comfortable quite yet with those type of vehicles. Chief can speak to that, but when we would be able to put EV inside the garage, that's going to be a lot easier to do that. So what we are planning to do on the exterior is that we are running conduit lines, and we are going to plan for future EV, both in the public parking area and then in the what we'd call staff or the secure area towards the back. So there's not intent with this project yet to put the EV charging stations in there, but we are, at the time of construction, it's easy enough to get conduit, size it out right, and actually run it to areas that we think would be good.
That sounds perfect.
And Nick, and we can be, and Mike, we can probably be flexible with this project to put in a couple or something out in the parking lot, but we definitely are gonna have the infrastructure for the future, both underground. And then in addition, what we're doing is we are proposing right now to put an extra section in our switch gear in the electrical room, so that we'll be sizing our gear to handle those upgrades in the future, because that is the biggest challenge we see on the electrical side, is that someone comes up, calls us and says, hey, we want to add all this electric vehicle charging. What they don't realize is their service typically isn't sized adequately to handle it. So we are planning for that already. So I believe we were anticipating roughly a 2,000 amp service for this building, and 2 to 3, and we're planning on sizing that gear for like 4,000. I mean, it's very inexpensive on the front end to put that gear in at that size and add that section, versus having to add it later in life. So that is another future sort of plan we have for that.
Yep, that's everything that I've heard is, when you have new construction, plan for that future, because it's a lot more money to do it later. So it sounds like this is a really, really well planned building, and thank you very much for all that info.
Yeah, sorry we didn't put that in the memo. That's my fault. Next, Mike, you mentioned PV, and as Mike mentioned, we have a layout right now. It's kind of I'm calling it a happy medium. We started with this project, we said, let's maximize PV on the roof and let's see how big of a system we could get. And then we said, well, let's pull it away from the perimeter so that we don't have to see it from the ground and take away from the aesthetics of the building. And then where we ended up, at least at this point, is kind of somewhere in between. We're trying to pull it away from the very perimeter so we don't see it as much, but we're still trying to fill that roof as much as possible. We are currently sitting at a 220-ish kW system, covers approximately 60% of the roof. It accounts for that, the HVAC rooftop equipment, the attic hatch to get up there, the plumbing, solar hot water, etc. And we have this little grid in the corner here. This is kind of where we're sitting right now. Based on that system size, we are looking at a annual savings, about $20,000, and a payback of just under 14 years right now for that system.
And just so the committees know, so when we're estimated kind of future operating costs, it was assumed we'd do something from a sustainability perspective, so kind of like a midline where this option's slightly above that. So ultimately, we'd be asking this committee to recommend an option, either bundle A, B, or C to village board to consider. Thank you, team.
All right, thanks everyone. I will defer to the other members of the committee if they want to make a motion.
I can make a motion then to the committee to recommend option 3 of what was presented to the village board.
All right,
I will second.
we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Nay? And abstain. All right, motion passes. Then we will move to number 7, engineers report.
Don't have a lot tonight to really discuss. A few of the development projects that are going on, West Lawn's kind of on hold until the spring. Quarry Ridge, they're digging in utilities out there now. The last phase of Quarry Ridge, that'd be phase D. They plan on, wrapping that up in the spring with street work. Amazon facility, the biggest thing for this would be kind of the improvements along both N and TT. They submitted their revised TIA for that. We provided a little bit of feedback. A lot of the feedback came from the county and the state, as that's their jurisdictional roadways. And we're waiting to hear response back from that development team on those overall improvements. Tonight, in the next meeting coming up in Plan Commission, there's a new development of Haydays coming with their PIP. So there'll be some work there that will come, there'll be public works related. One would be the extension of Fundamental Way in the cul-de-sac off of Cottage Grove Road, and then on Bus Road, there'll also be some turn movements into that development, both on Bus and Cottage Grove Road as part of that overall new site development. And then we talked about the 2025 street projects already. Is there any questions based on the report that I submitted?
No, all right, seeing none, we can move to director's report.
For sake of time, I'll just kind of give a brief overview. It's kind of a longer memo. A lot of stuff happened here in January. One thing that was discussed was the light pole bases. Most importantly, from last meeting, those have been removed and landscaped down. If you have any concerns, feel free to please let me know. There was a lot of social media and aspects about Winter Salt Week that you saw on Facebook. We had staff listen to some of the webinars as well that they found them very interesting, and we are implementing lower saltage usage as overall community. As Nick had already mentioned, I did listen to the EV infrastructure webinar. I can share, as well as Nick, those slides if you guys are interested in finding out more about that. Both the City of Madison and Dane County provided information on their operations. Our Safe Step for All grant that was done by the MPO, it was approved, and we do have funding for that. At this point in time, we are waiting for our final agreement with the MPO, because they are waiting on the final agreement with the federal government for the final funding before we start on that. So more information to come. We will be selling rain barrels again this year with the promotion as we have in the past. Distribution will be in April, and you'll start seeing that being advertised here in the village or through social media, and getting those orders in here in the upcoming weeks. And last but not least, we did provide website updates. Me and Inga worked to provide a more transparency on projects that are under design, under construction, and then projects that are planned that were approved already as part of the budget process and the FMP, just so that information is out there for the public. Any questions for me?
I encourage everybody to buy some rain barrels. I bought mine almost 2 years ago, and someday I will install it. Thanks. All right, question for the committee. Do we have time to go back and talk about the bench, or do we want to table that for next meeting? Will it take, can we get it done in 7 minutes, Kyla?
I think there's kind of a more discussion overarching on if we put benches, what that looks like, because it would have to go to parks and recreation, that I would suggest pushing it to the next meeting.
Okay. Does anybody have any objections to pushing that to the next meeting? I see
No.
at least 2 head shakes. So, all right, we will postpone that to the next meeting. Moving on to number 9, future agenda items. We heard about the transformer, or whatever that is, over by the Lift Bridge station. I also had a question. We had previously talked about doing a sidewalk up to, it came into my mind today because I walked here today in the snow, and I just wasn't sure if that was part of a project that was coming up, or if that was...
I checked to talk to JJ before he left on that, right? And the topography there is challenging.
Yeah.
And Josh can...
Yeah, we were in some topography problems with ADA, and it was kind of when JJ and John and everybody decided, well, we're just going to hold off on that. The idea there, the thought was there was going to be, if some other improvements happened along the side of the road and you were to actually urbanize it, it'd be easier to probably meet some of that, because you could get rid of some of that ditching. The ditching was the problem.
Yeah.
Okay, well then we don't have to add that to the future agenda. Okay. Anybody else have anything for the next agenda? Otherwise, we'll move to number 10.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
We have a motion.
Second.
A motion and a second, non-debatable. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Anybody opposed?
We have a date for our next meeting?
It's standing second Wednesday of the month,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
I'm
it'll
not
be,
sure what the date is off the
it'll
top
be
of my head.
March 12th.
March, of course, it's February. Okay, March 12th. We will see you all at 5:30. We are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.